We are going to talk about poetry and figurative language. During this presentation or this video, you guys need to take notes as we go. All of the information that you'll be asked to take notes on in this video or on the slideshow will be used later, or you will have to use it later. Almost every single day this next unit, you will be asked to apply the information that you learned from this slideshow or this video. And so if you don't write down the notes, then it's only going to be harder for you later. So work harder, not smarter. Okay, the first thing you guys are going to write down would be lines and stanzas. And then I'm actually going to have you guys write down all three of these. So what you need to write down is most poems are written in lines. A group of lines in a poem is called a stanza. And then almost most importantly, stanzas separate ideas in a poem, and they act like paragraphs. Here's an example. This is Children's Rhymes by Langston Hughes, and I chose this poem because it was in support of Black History Month. But you can clearly see that it is broken down into what you would think looks like paragraphs or into sections, but those are not paragraphs, those are stanzas. So this right here is a stanza, this right here is a stanza, and this right here is a stanza. Stanzas. And then if you're thinking about, okay, well, lines make up stanzas, then you are correct in thinking that all of these are lines. And that's what we mean by lines and stanzas in poetry. Some poetry elements that you guys will need to know are things like rhythm, imagery, form, meter, but you do not have to write this down because we will be going over them. The first one that I just talked about was rhythm. So go ahead and write down rhythm. You don't have to write down everything. In fact, after rhythm, you could just put this definition. It's a flow of the beat in a poem. You could also bullet point right underneath that musical feel, because you need to know that rhythm gives poetry that musical feel. And the last one, I want you guys to know this, but you do not have to write this down, but you can measure rhythm and meter by counting the beats in each line. So that's good for you guys to know, but you won't need to apply that at least this year. Down at the very bottom, I'm not going to go over this too long with you guys, but I asked, what is your favorite song or what is your favorite rap song? Because rhythm and the beats are really easy to see in songs. They're a form of poetry, believe it or not. So when you're thinking about rhythm and the flow and the beat of how you hear that poem or those words, then think about how that applies to rhythm and poetry and your favorite song. Imagery. So go ahead and write this down. Imagery. And you can write down is the use of words to create pictures or images in your mind. So basically what I mean by that is when you hear something or someone says something to you and they're trying to use imagery or they're creating imagery, you see what they're trying to have you see, or you see some variation of it. So something that you might want to write down as well is it appeals to the five senses, and I even listed them there: smell, sight, hearing, taste, and touch. And then basically by doing that, when you actually play to those five senses, you create strong images. You know, how something smelled, was it like a nasty smell? Was it actually a very pretty smell? Was it like perfume? Hearing, was it loud? Was it like, did it taste bad? Did it taste good? Was it too salty? Like, all of those describing words or those describing phrases create imagery. And imagery is best written when you use the senses. And then last but not least, I do want you guys to write this down at the very bottom. To create vivid images, writers use figures of speech, which we will be getting to in this presentation as well. But you will need to know that with imagery, it's directly tied to figures of speech. Here's an example. I'm not going to go through it with you guys. But what I want you guys to do right now is go ahead and you can write down all of the words or phrases that create imagery. So I'm going to put this right here so that you guys know. All words put highlight or write down all the words or phrases that create imagery, and then if you have time, label the senses. So which sense did that actually use? Did it have you see something? Did it have you hear something? Did it have you taste something? So go ahead and do that right now. And you can pause this video if you need to. Okay, here's another good example. And again, do the same thing. Go through, read it, see what words are helping create those strong images and if they play on your senses. Okay, meter and rhyme. So we're going to start with meter because it's first. So you can write this down. Meter is a regular pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables which sets the overall rhythm of certain poems. So I just need you to know what meter is. But basically, like there's a cadence or there's a flow, a rhythm to these poems, and meter is how we are able to measure that and how we label that. And then you can write this down, right down here, but typically stressed syllables are marked with this symbol and unstressed syllables are marked with this symbol. And that allows us to know what the emphasis is on within those words or phrases. If something's stressed, that means that that's the sound that comes through. If something is unstressed, that means that it's not as loud. Rhyme. Rhymes are words that end with the same sound, which I'm pretty sure you guys already knew that. So you should just have to write that down. Those would be like hat, cat, and bat were the examples that I gave you. Rhyming sounds don't have to be spelled the same way though, which is what I want you guys to be aware. So you can just bullet point it underneath where you just wrote the definition for rhyme. They don't have to be spelled the same way. And then you can even put in this example, cloud versus aloud. They sound the same at the end. They have that similar sound, but they are not spelled the same, obviously. And then rhyme is the most common sound device in poetry. Okay, here are some rhyming patterns that you guys might want to write down. If you can do this or know this, and not have to write it down, that's fine too. But AABB basically means that A, line 1 and 2 rhyme, and lines 3 and 4 rhyme. Just same thing with down here. Line 1 and 3, we're looking at this. Line 1 and 3 rhyme, A, and line 2 and 4 rhyme. Same with this one right here. This means like A, the A's go together, so line 1 and 4, the B's go together. And down here at the bottom, they started incorporating, because you can have as many rhymes as you want, like the stanzas can be longer than just 4 lines. But this means that line 1 rhymes, or is in its own little world right now. Line 2 and 4 rhyme, and then line 3 has its own rhyme as well, or it has its own ending to that word. So that's what it means when you're looking at rhyming patterns. Okay, so here's a really good example that we're going to go through and do together. So what I want you guys to do on your paper, if you want, you can just write like the last words. So like bake, cake, bubble, trouble, life, knife, jewels, fools, wrapper, her, inside, died. Because all you need to know is the last word of that line. So if we're looking at the first one, and we look at, so they put me in the oven to bake. Oh, by the way, this is the poem, The Life of a Cupcake, which I thought you guys would enjoy. They put me in the oven to bake, me a deprived and miserable cake. Feeling the heat, I started to bubble. Watching the others, I knew I was in trouble. So if we're looking at what's rhyming in these, we see that bake sounds a lot like cake. So we have A. Same thing with the second one. We see that bubble and trouble rhyme, so we label that B. And we keep going. We know that life and knife go together. We know that jewels and fools go together. Wrapper, her, inside, died. We know all of those go together. Okay, so if we know that they all rhyme, then our rhyme scheme is going to look something like this. A, B, C, D, E, F. Because each one of them are new rhymes, but they do go together. So the letters and the way that we label it tells whoever's reading it that we understand that those two things rhyme and they go together. They're like a pair. Okay, now we're going to move on to figures of speech. A figure of speech, so go ahead and write this down. So, figures of speech. Figure of speech is a word or expression that is not meant to be read literally. Now, if you're thinking, okay, what is literally? One, you can look it up. But two, basically what that means is not to take it as seriously. If I say something is literal, that means it's fact, it's concrete, it's something that is exactly what it is. If I say don't take it literally, it means don't just take it at face value. And I'm gonna get into a little bit more of what I mean by that when I say that. Okay, here, going off of not taking things literally, denotation versus connotation. So go ahead and write it down. connotation,